Are you ready to become an escape-reneur? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Bye Bye 9 to 5 podcast, designed by brilliant women, especially for brilliant women who want to create the life of their dreams by escaping the 9 to 5.
Welcome to Bye Bye 9 to 5 podcast, where we are helping women to leave the 9 to 5 and actually build a business that they love so they can lead the life that they love. Definitely listen, subscribe, and comment on the podcast. Download the episodes so you can listen to them on the go. And today, I have a wonderful, wonderful guest, Miss Dona Bumgarner. And she is going to give us some interesting information, some tips for moms. She has a website called The Nurtured Mama. And Dona, Dona works with creative entrepreneurs who want to do meaningful work and also be awesome moms. They want to get out from behind the guilt and the overwhelm and find a little space for themselves again. But it feels impossible to balance all the pieces. So that's where Dona comes in. She helps them to focus their time and energy so they confidently pursue their passions, make a difference in the world, and be present and engage moms. Welcome, Dona. I absolutely love that. You know, a part of my mission with all of this, with Bye Bye 9 to 5, is really helping moms to escape that 9 to 5 world and get back in the homes so they can spend time with their families. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If you will, Dona, tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, so I'm an escape the 9 to 5 story. I left corporate work when I was pregnant with my daughter. So, and it wasn't exactly because I was pregnant. It was sort of a coincidence. But I worked at Apple for a little bit over a decade. I was a software tester to start with, and then I was a project manager for a number of years. And by the time I left, I was running a team of project managers. So it was a pretty solid job.
Mm-hmm.
But I was over it. Frankly, I was ready to do something else. So I thought that I was going to go to business school. So I turned in notice and I had applied to an MBA program, and I was going to get an MBA and then figure out my next steps. I thought maybe I'd come back to Apple, but in a different capacity. And then I found out I was pregnant. Surprise. So, you know, I have to admit, I had a month or two of, what am I doing? Leaving my job and about to have a baby. This is crazy. That's a really bad idea. But then I thought about who I wanted to be as a mom. And I realized that the life I was living in that corporate career, I also lived about an hour away from my job. So I had, 2-ish hours of commute every day, plus 8 hours of work, plus really I was working in the evening every night. I did not want to be that kind of mother. I wanted to be at home, I wanted to be at home with my baby, and I wanted to be at home with her from the very beginning. So I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'll go to grad school. But then once I got to grad school, once I got into that MBA program, I realized that I really didn't want to do that either.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was really sort of lost. And luckily I had saved up money to be in MBA school for 2 years. So I had some time to kind of figure out what I was going to do next, but I withdrew from the MBA program after a semester. My daughter was not born yet by that time. I was still pregnant by the time I withdrew. So I stayed home with her from the very beginning. And it was shell-shocking, I'll have to be honest. It was hard to go from the life I had envisioned for myself into this really unknown of, leaving. Apple is an exciting place to work. There's smart people and fast projects and really interesting technology. And then I was at home with a baby and she didn't even talk. That was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. So I experimented a lot. I knew I wanted to be at home. So I was experimenting with a lot of different freelance sorts of things. I did some freelance writing. I did a little bit of teaching. I started a blog when she was about 9 months old. I started writing about mindful mothering and self-care, all the things I was really learning myself about how to be a mom, how to be the kind of mom I wanted to be and the tools I needed. And I should also mention that I came to motherhood a little bit late. I was 38 when I had my daughter. So I had a lot of life experience under my belt, but I didn't have any parenting experience under my belt. So I was really trying to figure out how to bring those two pieces together. And, I'm a creative person. So the way I figure out how my life is working is I write about it. It's one of my tools. So I started a blog so I could figure out my life. and it was really well received. That was where Nurtured Mama started. So that blog started when my daughter was really little, and it's morphed over time. And now it's the backbone of my coaching business. So I would love to say that, and then I found my passion, and then the next step was I found my passion, then it was all good from there. It really didn't work like that. It was really a lot of years of, when am I going to find my passion? What if I never find my passion? What if I don't, what if I can't do this? What if I have to go back to work? We downsized a bit so that I could afford to stay home without bringing in a lot of money. So I reduced the pressure on myself, which I think was a really wise thing to do. And I recommend that for a lot of moms who really, really want to stay home. Don't put yourself under pressure to make a ton of money with your new business at the beginning, because they don't actually work that way most of the time.
Right.
And just when I was starting to feel like I had my feet under me and I was sort of feeling confident about, maybe finding some new things I could do, maybe spending a little bit more time out of the house. My daughter was in preschool. Then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that was a whole big, 5 steps back from where I was. But the upside of that, if there's any upside to cancer, was that I had all the flexibility in the world to just focus on my health. I didn't have to quit my job. I didn't have to work at the same time. I could just be a cancer patient for the months that I needed to be a cancer patient, and then really heal afterwards. And there's a lot of healing you have to do after cancer treatment. It's not, it's not like it ends and then it's just over.
Right.
I had at least a year of really intense not being myself before I started to feel well again. And in that same period of time, my relationship started to stumble in some pretty serious ways. So my partner and I separated, and we've been off and on. It's a complicated situation, but we've been off and on really since then. And he hasn't been living with us for the last almost 3 years. So very shortly after recovering from cancer, I found myself a single parent. And I still had really no job. So it was pretty scary. But in that period of recovery from cancer, the other upside of cancer is it really clarifies what's going on in your life, what's important and what's not important. And so all the things that were not important to me fell away, partly because I had no space for them. I was single parenting and I was exhausted. But it also really made me focus on what I wanted in my life. And that was that I wanted a career that really made me feel as excited and invigorated as my job at Apple had. I wanted to work with smart people. I wanted to work with people who were really engaged in what they were doing and excited about it. And I wanted to bring all the skills that I had learned from my time at Apple to people who really needed them. And I realized that the pieces of my work at Apple that I loved the most were managing people. And I had heard from my employees that I was an unusual manager and that I was very, now I would say I was very coach oriented. I didn't have the language for that then, but I wasn't directive. I wasn't like, this is what you need to do. I was very much about, what skills do you need to learn to make you really good at your job, and how do we get you those skills, and how can I support you? And I loved that. And then, so I realized, I could be a coach and use all those skills. So I took a coach training program, and I loved it from the very first moment I started. And so that's where I found my passion. So, that was six years after leaving my job. It took me that long. And now I have a business that is based on helping women entrepreneurs who want to be at home with their kids, but also want something more in their lives, which I think most of us do, if we're really honest. Even if we want to stay home with our kids, being a full-time parent is really not that fulfilling for most of us.
Right.
So I help those moms figure out how to balance those pieces, which is hard. And we're not trained to do that. And most of us don't have those skills. And it's a lot of time management and project management and prioritization and, all those pieces that I used as a project manager. I can now help moms do what they're really passionate about. And it's so awesome. It's so fun and exciting for me.
Good. That's an amazing story. Oh my God. Yeah. Now, so many golden nuggets in there, Dona. You talked about it's almost like traveling through this rabbit hole of what do I want to do? What do I want to be?
Yeah.
And so many of us have that journey simply because, we get a job and we're moms and we just think that that's what we're supposed to be and that's it. We're going to be an employee. We're going to be a mom. We're going to be somebody's wife or partner or what have you. And that's it. But there's just so much more to life for us, especially us as women, because, they say multitasking is not good for you, but we just do it so well.
We just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we just do it. And it's not intentional, but we can wear these different hats and fall into these different roles and switch between them effortlessly. And so I think just my audience hearing that message, that it's not always so clear in the beginning, is important. Now, there's a lot of ways for those of you who are listening out there who may resonate with Dona's message because you have felt the same way or you are feeling the same way. Please know that there are coaches out there like Dona who can help you navigate through that process. I love coaches who have been there and done that.
Yeah.
I don't want a textbook coach. I really don't. I hate to say that. Someone who's just dabbling in it or trying to figure it out. It's the people that have been there and have done that, have walked the walk. So now they're talking that talk because they've really walked it. And so, Dona, it sounds like on several different levels. I mean, you're just an unusual coach in the aspect that you have got the creative background and the technical background. Those two things.
I know. I don't know anybody else who has that particular combination. It's kind of weird.
No, because normally the creative coaches that I do know, they are running from the technical pieces. They're like, oh no, I don't want to do that part of it.
Yeah.
So definitely know that for my audience, if you're listening and you're a creative, that there are ways to merge the two. Dona can help you with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now, so you've got the nurtured mama, and you are working with helping moms just kind of work through all of that. Tell us how do you really kind of do that with mamas?
Yeah, that's a great question. I currently have a couple of small coaching options, which is where people generally start with me. I have one package called To-Do List Rescue, which is where many, many people start with me. And that's targeted for women who are just like really overwhelmed with their to-do list. So it's very, very much figuring out how to sort through all those things that you have, all that multitasking that you're talking about. How do you get out of that space of overwhelm into feeling like you're back in control? And then I have a second coaching package that's a little bit more focused on women who feel like they don't know what their next step is. So that's kind of what you were talking about just a minute ago. I'm currently calling that one Get Unstuck. I have to rewrite the copy a little bit because I'm finding people are not quite understanding what it is. So, but from my heart, what it is, whether I've written the copy correctly or not, it's for women who are not quite sure what their next step is. Right. And it's a short package. So it's not designed, that particular one is not designed to help you for a long term. It's just designed to help you get your next step in front of you. Like, what's the next thing you can do to help you get on that path? And then I also work with a number of women in a longer term way, and that's a little bit more organic. So I've had clients who come to me who need help with boundaries. They have a vision for what they want to build in their life, but they just can't seem to get out from under what everybody else needs. So we work on that stuff. I have a client who has been working with me off and on for a long term. And she just comes to me when she's like, I feel kind of stuck about this project and I just need some hand holding, So I'm sure that there is a business model that says I should have really clear packages. But what I love doing is hearing what people need help with and then figuring out how to support them with that. And that, it goes back to the way I used to manage, like I was talking about a minute ago, is that, how can I help you do the thing you want to do? How can I help you be better at this thing that you're excited about? And that's the kind of coaching I love to do.
Yeah. Dona, I don't think that there should be any business models that do your coaching. It sounds like your coaching is authentic and just very you, that you're putting all of you into your coaching. And I think that's amazing. And the thing that really pricked in my mind when you were talking a minute ago was the fact that you talked about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Not, there's a lot of coaching programs where people come in and say, all right, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this, 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 and this. I have this whole thing laid out, and that may not be what I need.
Right.
I love the fact that you are saying, well, you come to me and have a conversation. I get to know you. We walk alongside each other and we figure out what is it exactly that you want or you need.
Yeah.
And what your next steps are. And I love that.
Yeah, it's very goals focused, and the goal is set by the client. And I can help them clarify that goal, because often people come to me and they're like, I don't know what I want. My life is a mess. I can't figure it out. So I can help people figure out what their goal is, certainly. But the goal is set by the person I'm working with. I don't have an end game goal for anyone I'm working with. I just want them to be happy in their lives. And that's self-defined. It's so self-defined.
Nice. Very nice. Now, as well, you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about what your podcast is.
Yeah, my podcast is called Nurturing Habit, and it is one of the most fun things I do for my business, I have to say. And I came to podcasting as a very reluctant podcaster. I did not think this was something I was ever going to do. But as I came through that period of my life where I was recovering from cancer and my relationship was coming apart, and my father also died that same year, I just felt like I had some really important things I needed to talk about. And I was not finding those conversations anywhere. And I wanted to talk about how we nurture ourselves really, really deeply, not like surface level self-care, not, what my usual refrain is, not bubble baths and pedicures, but really, really deep stuff. And so my first episode was about nurturing ourselves in grief, because that's where I was, I started there because that's where I was. And it's, in some way, it was an excuse to call a bunch of people and talk about grief with them, which was personally very healing. But I've heard from people who've listened to that series, and that was like the first 8 episodes of my podcast. But I've heard from people who listened to that series who found great healing in it as well.
Nice.
And I sort of love that it's just sitting out there as a resource for people whenever they need it. I love that podcasts are just there, And now I've moved on to nurturing yourself in self-care. And my goal there was to go really, really deep on that topic, not just how do we nurture ourselves on the surface, how do we do self-care on the surface, but how do we do self-care when our lives are falling apart? How do we do self-care in ways that maybe don't look like what we'd expect? I did an episode about the kinds of unusual self-care that I use in my own life that are things like planning ahead really far so that I don't have so many decisions. And so I'm not in decision fatigue so much, about, doing a meal plan and setting up bill pay for all my bills, and signing my daughter up for summer camps in March, things like that.
Yes.
And I've also interviewed people who are working in these really interesting fields that looked like self-care for me, even though they weren't calling it that. So I talked to a photographer who I know from long ago in my life, who I know has a style of photography that is very, I don't even quite know how to describe it, but she sees you in such an authentic way that when you get the pictures that she has taken, you see yourself differently.
Oh, wow.
And I know that women have been deeply healed by the process of being photographed by her. And so I really wanted her perspective of like, what is it to be that photographer who does that for people, and how do you interact with your clients? I also talked with a scrapbooker and a couple of people who do life storytelling kinds of processes, writing about people's stories. So it's just been a really sort of far-reaching conversation about what is self-care, what can it look like. And I'm just wrapping up that season, and I'm about to move into a season that's about business. So again, I'm going to do a really deep dive about how do we nurture our businesses? How do we nurture ourselves while we're running our businesses? And I don't know where that's going to go yet. I haven't made the list of interviewees and I haven't made the list of topics, but I'm excited to see where that takes me.
Very nice. That's very nice. As a side project, I do some stuff in that self-care space.
Yeah.
Just a long time ago, when I was newly divorced and had 3 younger kids, I just didn't understand how much I needed to love me more.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that the loving me allowed me to love the people around me more.
Oh, yeah, that's such a beautiful way to put it.
And so that it took me, I tell you, my kids really laugh about it because they're very appreciative, but they tease me about it all the time because they feel like I gave up my entire life, my entire social life, just to spend all my time with them, to be able to, throw my life into making sure that they were raised properly and had a good environment and what have you. But what they didn't realize is that, and I tell them that all the time, I got more out of that than you did, really. Because I so learned to love me during that time. Yeah. I just so learned to love me.
Yeah.
And I needed that, and so I feel like that was the best awakening that I ever had in my life. It was like an awakening for me, because when that happened, I feel like I didn't care about what other people thought. I didn't want to keep up with the Joneses anymore. I didn't care about how people perceived me and the way I did things. It gave me the ability to feel unleashed, where I could take risk and leap and not care and just not care where I land. It was the most beautiful thing for me. And I so want other women who are judgmental and unforgiving of themselves to feel that freedom to just love yourself unconditionally.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that. And we as mamas are like, we are the worst ones. We're so hard on ourselves, aren't we?
We are. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an interesting point. And this is something that I think about a lot as I mother my daughter. I just have one child and she's 7. And she, mothering a daughter is a really interesting thing because I see so much of myself in her. Her personality is very different than mine, but I see so much of myself in her, and but I also see so much positive of myself in her. Like, I was like that when I was a kid. How did I change? How did I become so different? How did I become so hard on myself? But I also recognize that she's watching me. She's watching me to see how to be a woman in the world.
Yes.
And if I want her to keep that positivity and self-awareness and self-kindness that I see in her naturally right now, then I have to keep doing it. I have to show it to her, because I don't want her to think that when you become a grown-up, you start getting mean to yourself,
Right.
Like, I don't want her to think that that's how it's supposed to go, because I don't want her to do it, So that has really changed how I act, which of course changes how I feel.
Yes.
Just in trying to be a better role model for her. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Donia. That's beautiful. That's a big golden nugget for mamas that are listening, because my mom has passed away some time now, but she was my greatest role model of all time and will always be. And so I think you make a grand point there. It's the things that she sees you do and the way that you love yourself, and the more conscious of it you are in doing that, you are continuing to love yourself more and more and more. And the crazy thing about that is that, and I found that out by accident, is that the more I loved myself, the more I saw the entire world as love.
Yeah.
It really did. So it was, my attitude changed. I became more positive. I became more caring, more empathetic, more loving. It just happened by default because I just didn't see any bad spots. And so I think it's so interesting that you mention that, because I think that is definitely the sequence for mamas, is that you are watching what you're doing, becoming that role model for your students. I mean, well, not for your students, but
your students who are your children.
Children,
yeah. And there's another piece of that too that I want to mention, and I'm thinking about this today because I actually posted about this on my Instagram account last night. I had a really rough day earlier this week, and I ended up yelling at my daughter and feeling terrible about it, and then crying. Like, it was rough, but I admitted to her I was having a really rough day, and I wasn't mad at her. I was sorry I yelled, I wasn't mad at her. I was just mad in general, and it wasn't about her. And she went away and she wrote me this beautiful little love note. And I was thinking about how when I admit to her that I am not perfect, it feels like such a failing, right? When we tell our kids, I can't do this, I'm not, I yell sometimes, I don't know the answer, and I think especially as single moms, it's really hard to not be all powerful, because we want our kids to feel safe, right? There's that flip side where we really want our kids to feel safe. But when I can admit to her that I'm struggling, she also learns how to persevere because she sees me persevering through my struggle. Yeah. And that is something that's so important for our kids, girls and boys both, is to be able to see that vulnerability in their parents, because they need to learn how to be vulnerable and how to get through that tough stuff. So that's the other piece of it that I just wanted to include, is that, it's not just about being gentle with ourselves. It's also about letting our kids see our struggle and then being gentle with ourselves, because they need to learn that part too.
I agree with that totally. So totally. I have a friend and her husband, and they would shelter their children from all of the struggles that they were going through. And what's interesting is that they had decided, they had grown apart and decided they wanted to get a divorce. Their children was so blindsided. Their children,
they had no idea.
Yeah, they were so hurt. They were like, my mom and dad was the perfect couple. And then all of a sudden we woke up one morning and they weren't anymore.
Right.
Now they're telling us we're going our separate ways. And we never knew that there was anything wrong.
Right. And that's going to lead them to lives where they don't trust love, because they don't know what makes it come apart. And that's heartbreaking.
Yes, it is. It is so, because, I spoke with her daughter, and because she was kind of venting to me. And, I kept thinking, why not? Life is difficult. the life is a difficult process, and as much as we want to shelter them from that, they need to know that life comes with challenges and struggles, and this is how we as parents overcome that. And so it's important. Yeah, you don't want to share all of that with them, but they need to see a portion of that.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I mean, it needs to be age appropriate, and they need to feel safe. Of course, that's the most important thing. But,
right.
There are ways to do that and also let them see what's real.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. Now, definitely check out Dona's podcast, The Nurturing Habit. I love that. And so it sounds like you find a lot of good resources there, especially as a mama going through things. So it sounds like there's a lot of solutions there, or a lot of people that you can relate to, at least. So definitely listen to that podcast. Now, Dona, you said an unusual thing about you is that you don't drink coffee anymore, but you need for coffee. What's that about?
Yeah, I stopped drinking coffee because I don't know if it was chemotherapy or just getting older, but I stopped being able to tolerate it.
Really?
I just can't drink it anymore. I started having panic attacks a couple years ago. I mean, I was going through some stuff, so there was reason that my anxiety was up, but I realized that when I drank coffee, I had a panic attack. So I was like, well, that's a really easy answer. I'm just going to stop drinking coffee. And I thought it would just be a little while and I'd be able to go back to it, because honestly, I love coffee and I miss it. Oh, yeah. But I cannot even drink decaf coffee without having anxiety now. So I don't drink it anymore.
Oh my gosh, my life would be over if I didn't drink coffee.
I really thought that would be true. And it did take some adjustment. It took some time of learning how to feel what tired was, and it means that I can't skimp on sleep anymore. If I am tired, I have to go to bed, because there is no crutch in the morning for waking me up. So that has definitely changed in my life, that I really have clear boundaries around when I go to bed now and how I sleep. But it's really been nice to not feel addicted, like there's this other flip side where it's like, I can drink my tea in the morning or not. I don't get a headache, I don't feel like I have to have it, which sometimes, especially when traveling, it's hard to get good coffee, and so then you're like going around with a headache, and I don't have to do that anymore. So that's nice too.
Yes. Very nice. Yeah. I don't know.
And I'm just as productive. I do want to say that. Like, I get as much or more done without coffee, I think, as I used to before. And I don't know, somehow it feels better, because it's like, this is all me. Like, this is not the chemical in my body. This is my own effort.
Oh, that's nice. I don't know if I want to know what that feels like, though. I so love coffee. It's like, oh.
Yeah, I'm really no advocate for quitting coffee. I loved coffee too. But, just so people know, there is a life after coffee. If for any reason you have to give it up, you can do it.
Yes. Okay. Now, one of your favorite quotes is, done is better than perfect. Oh, I love that. Tell us why you love that quote.
I know. Doesn't it feel free?
Yes. Why do you love that quote?
Yeah, well, I think that it is so common for women, especially moms, especially, to get caught up in the perfectionism of, we have to do things a certain way, whether it's in parenting or it's in our work or, whatever we're producing. And this really came from my experience working in a computer company, because the reality is that computer companies ship products before they're perfect. We have to, because, if you keep working on it till it's perfect, it'll never get shipped. So as a project manager, it was my job to close the door and say, no more fixes. Yes. It was my job to say, this is good enough. We're going to ship it to customers now, and we'll figure out what we need to fix after the customers get their hands on it. And that's a hard line to draw. It is a really hard line to draw. But that experience has allowed me to see in the rest of my life that we don't have to be nearly as perfect as we think. And that for the most part, people will not notice the imperfections that we see in what we're doing. And that was what we found with software projects. We would ship something with a list of 150 bugs still remaining, and customers would report 2 of them to us, that really only impacted them. So, wow. And that's true in the rest of your life, whether it's how you interact with your kids won't notice the details for most things. Your work product is probably good enough far before you think you're done. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that also recognizing that I have a very high work ethic. So this is about really learning to figure out which details are important and which details are not. And sometimes the best way to find that out is to experiment. So ship things, I'm using the software term, ship things, let things go when it still feels really uncomfortable. And you will learn pretty quickly over 2 or 3 experiences like that, like, okay, that was too early. I really should have worked on that more. Or, wow, that was okay. It was totally fine. And you will learn your own tolerance for what is okay, where done is for you. But the important thing is really to get your stuff into the world, whether it's a creative project you're working on or something you're working on for your business. I just recently went through this with a fairly new opt-in for my email list. I could have worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and there's still changes in it that I would love to make. But it was more important for me to get it into the hands of people who could use it, and then I can change it later. I can keep changing it. There's no reason to say I can't update it.
Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right. We, especially women, we do that to a fault. It's like, I have a friend who is a coach as well, but he's a guy. He will send me stuff that he's already made like live. And there's like so many. I'm like, oh my gosh, Fred, is this live already? And he's like, oh, sure. I just did it. He said, I thought about it. I did it. I put it up.
Yeah.
And I just put it up in 30 minutes. I was like, what? And
that's crazy.
Like, he said, I'm not going to even worry about it because I know I'm going to send it to you and you're going to look at it and you're going to point out all these errors to me. I'll go back and fix them. And I have better things to do with my time. I'm like, what? So it's so important. But yeah, we will over perfect things. We will, or we'll let that, I was talking to someone this morning about how I let that little feeling inside get me when I'm about to publicize something, like to a group of people that know me or something. It's like, oh, what if they don't like it? What if they're critical? And that's nothing but my little fear monitor going off, I call it. And I have to say, quiet all of that. Just go ahead and put it out there anyway. Because we're so stuck on perfection. A lot of times we're just so really stuck on that. So I love that quote. I'm going to adopt that one.
Yeah. And something that you said about your friend, I wanted to pull out of that, just make a point there, is that your friend said, I've got better things to do than to make this perfect. And that's kind of why I like this quote so much, because I have better things to do too. I have a daughter to raise. I have a household to run. I have a business I want to grow. I don't have time to be making everything perfect. I want to be moving in my life, So that's something to think about too, is if you keep working on something to make it totally perfect, what are you giving up in that time? And if you just make it done, what can you go do with that time that you're saving? And that's probably way, way more valuable than whatever little details that no one's going to notice anyway.
Yes, Donia, that was good. I hope you caught that. That was profound. That was really good. Yeah, it's like, I've got better things to do. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Donia, it was great having you here.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation.
Yes, and Donia has a really great free gift for everyone, the Get Back in Control of Your Life workbook. And I will post the link on my website, Kim Wiggins Coaching, on a page for Donia. And you will be able to find it there and all of her contact information on how to reach her at thenurturingmama.net. And yeah, Donia, one last question.
Yeah.
If you could just leave my audience today with one inspired action item that they can do right now, that they could take away right now and just put in place today.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the to-do list thing. So one thing that you can do today that will really help you feel in charge of your to-do list and not overwhelmed by it and feel like you can take action in your life, which is what we really all want to be doing, is taking action, is to really review your to-do list and make sure that the items you have on there are tasks and not projects. And this is something that is so easy to fall into. You know, we put something on our to-do list and we're like, oh, I'll do that next. But if you really look at it, and I'll tell you the difference between a task and a project. If you really look at it and you're like, oh, I don't know what the next step is, that's a project. Mm-hmm. A task is the next step. So if you have something on your to-do list that's sort of feeling big and you don't know how to get your arms around it, you don't know quite what to do, then move that to a different list, break it down into its own list, figure out what the next step is, and then the next step after that, and then take that first step, put that back on your to-do list. That's your task.
That's a good one. Yes, Donia, you're so right. And a lot of people make that mistake because they've got these big hulking things on their list.
Yeah, like update my website. That's not a task.
That's not a task.
What's the very next thing you need to do in order to update your website? That's the task.
Yes, definitely. And so ladies, if you are feeling stuck, and by stuck, I mean, if you are feeling like you don't know what the next step is, or what do you want out of life, or what you feel like you're spinning out of control and you just need some order and you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out to Donia. She's got a lot of great resources that can help you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes. And so this is our episode at Bye Bye 9 to 5 podcast. Have a wonderful week. Definitely like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast, and we will catch you on the next episode. All right? Bye.
This episode of the Bye Bye 9 to 5 podcast has ended, but it doesn't stop there. Be sure to subscribe for more strategies and advice to help you move from employee to escapreneur, to have the kind of success you have always dreamed of without sacrificing family or time. And don't forget to rate and review us so we can continue to bring you the best content possible to motivate and encourage you on this journey. See you on the next episode.